So today I'm going to talk about an Islamic doctrine that is rarely discussed, which is weird because it is, sorry, I'm just adjusting my notes here, which is weird because it is so terrifying once you understand it properly. Now, this doctrine within Islamic theology is known as commanding right and forbidding wrong, and it says that it is a religious duty that it is incumbent upon all Muslims to prescribe, instruct and enforce what is good, and to preach against, to combat, to prevent what is bad. Now this is a problem because we know where the Islamic standard of right and wrong is coming from. It's coming from the Quran, the Sunnah, the Hadith and the Sharia. And as instructional guides for civilization, these are desperately weak sources. Just before we move on, I want to make sure that video is still lined up properly. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, anyway, this is professional. So, let's take a look at the scriptural root for this doctrine. First, we'll go to Surah 3, Al-Imran, verses 104. Let there be one community, one ummah, of you calling to good and commanding right and forbidding wrong. These are the prosperous. Staying with Surah 3, let's go to verse 110. You are the best community that ever emerged for humanity. You advocate what is moral and forbid what is immoral, and believe in God. Then let's go forward to Surah 9, verses 71. And the believers, men and women, are friends of another. They enjoin good and forbid evil. Now, let's take a look next at how these verses... Oh, sorry, there's one more. I wanted to go to the Hadith. And Muhammad says, whoever sees a wrong and is able to put it right with his hand, let him do so, and if he cannot, then with his tongue, and if he can't, then in his heart, and that is the bare minimum of faith. So now let's take a look at how these verses are translated into reality. In this video, I'm going to focus on the second half of the equation, the forbidding wrong, because that's the part I find most troubling. And for this, I'm going to go to Michael Cook. If you're not aware of Michael Cook and you're interested in this area of research within Islamic theology, then you need to know him. He has perhaps done more research than anyone else on the doctrine of commanding right and forbidding wrong. So he categorises forbidding wrong into three separate sections. The first is violations against religious norms. Now this is ensuring that religious ceremonies are practiced in the correct way, that praying is done in the proper manner. The second is offences against puritanical norms. This is the second category. So we have drinking, that's alcohol, drinking alcohol, making music, indulging in improper sexual relations. And the third is secular norms. An example that Michael Cook routinely gives of this is something like blocking a street. That would be an example of a violation of a secular norm. So those are the three categories. Now, I don't think the doctrine requires too much breakdown. I think the immorality of it is fairly overt, fairly explicit. But just for argument's sake, let's drill down and excavate the essence of the text, the essence of these quotations, and examine the teaching in a purer form. I think under all of the quotations I've read, and indeed under the three categories of forbidding wrong that Michael Cook gives, there is a subtext that reads as follows. We, as in the Islamic people, have a teaching that was revealed to us in the 7th century, and on the basis of that teaching we have formulated a book, and on the basis of that book we know what is best for you, and we can force it upon you. Now, if my estimation of the subtext is correct, and I think you'll find if you consult the text honestly, you'll agree with me. If I'm correct, this is a perfect distillation of the idea of Big Brother. I'll just read that subtext again. Bearing in mind I'm not physically reading anything, this is something I've generated of my own doing. This is not from any religious text, but I understand this to be the subtext, the underlying theme of the doctrine of commanding right and forbidding wrong. So anyway, that we know what is best for you and we can force it upon you. So therefore, we arrive at the seemingly unavoidable idea that Islam is a totalitarian idea, By the way, this is not particularly unique to Islam. Most religions, certainly all the monotheistic religions, are totalitarian by nature. It speaks to us as though we are children. It says there is a Lord in the sky who looks down upon us and says, you are unable to guide yourselves. You are unable to think for yourselves. I will think for you. I will guide you. And where necessary, I will do so by force. Now, to those people who would say, well, this is just an academic point you're making here, because this doctrine never manifests itself in reality. To those who would say, okay, Islam does have a fixed standard of right and wrong, but Muslims aren't trying to force this on people, I would have to say in reply to those who would make that kind of argument that they are simply incorrect. This doctrine does manifest itself in reality. It's just that we call the manifestation a different name. We know the act of force by a different name. We call it jihad, or holy war. Now, the act of jihad is the act of pushing the Dar al-Islam, the land of Islam, into the Dar al-Harb. That's to say, the act of jihad is the act of pushing the land of the right into the land of the wrong. This is why Islam teaches an expansionist jihad. Islam to the end of the earth, Fard ala al-Kifaya. Jihad, therefore, is an extension of the doctrine of commanding right and forbidding wrong. Now, finally, I have to say it, even though it is death-defyingly boring to keep doing this, but it has to be done. Of course, I'm not talking about all Muslims when I'm saying this. I fully understand that the overwhelming majority of Muslims are ignoring this teaching. However, it has to be noted here that this observation only serves to strengthen the correlation that a lack of adherence to religious scripture is positively correlated with human decency. I think that'll do. Cheers.